They sent her to the meanest man in 3 counties as a joke, to watch her cry, to watch her break. But what those cruel girls didn't know was that sometimes the punchline becomes the power, and the laughingstock becomes the last one standing. This is the story of Nora Briggs, a woman the world tried to bury, and Cole Ashford, a man the world learned to fear. By the end, no one was laughing. Stay with me until the very last word, and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see just how far Nora's story can travel across this world. The kitchen of Mrs. Halloway's boarding house smelled like burnt onions and desperation. 7 girls crowded around a single wooden table, their laughter sharp as broken glass, their eyes fixed on the notice board like vultures circling a carcass. It was Saturday morning, which meant no factory shifts, no errands for the matron, and no escape for Nora Briggs, who stood at the cast-iron stove stirring a pot of watery oatmeal that no one would thank her for. "Look at this one," Susanna Pike said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness as she tore a yellowed paper from the board. The tack clattered to the floor. "Help wanted, barn work, daily pay, apply in person at Ashford Ranch." The other girls leaned in, their faces lighting up with the kind of cruel delight that comes easy when you've got nothing else to feel powerful about. Ashford Ranch? Betty Crane's eyes went wide. That's Cole Ashford's place. The man who broke Jimmy Tate's jaw last spring just for calling his horse ugly. "My brother says he's got the devil in him," added Lila Monroe, twirling a strand of honey-colored hair around her finger. "Says his own daddy used to beat him bloody, and now Cole's got all that rage locked up inside, just waiting to explode on someone." Nora kept stirring, slowly, rhythmically, pretending she couldn't hear them, pretending their words didn't crawl under her skin and settle there like splinters. "You know who'd be perfect for barn work?" Susanna's voice rose, theatrical and vicious. "Someone with the right build for it." The laughter started low and built like a storm. Nora's hand tightened on the wooden spoon. She knew what was coming. She always knew. "Nora," Susanna sang out. "Oh, Nora, come here, sweetness. We found you a job." Nora turned slowly, her cheeks already burning. At 19 years old, she'd learned to move through the world like she was apologizing for taking up space in it. Her dress, a faded gray thing that had belonged to someone else first, hung loose on her frame, but not loose enough to hide the body that had been the subject of 1,000 cruel jokes. Too fat, too round, too much. "What is it?" Nora's voice came out smaller than she wanted. Susanna held up the paper like it was a royal decree. "Mr. Cole Ashford is looking for help at his ranch, barn cleaning, mucking stalls, hauling hay, hard work." She paused, her smile widening. "Physical work. I think you'd be ideal." "I don't know anything about ranch work," Nora said quietly. "Oh, but you're strong, aren't you?" Betty chimed in, poking Nora's arm. "All that substance. Surely that's good for something besides taking up space at the dinner table." The other girls giggled. Nora felt her throat tighten. "Besides," Lila added, examining her nails with studied indifference, "Mrs. Halloway's been talking about reducing beds again. Winter's coming, and she needs girls who can pay their keep." "You're already behind 3 weeks, aren't you, Nora?" That was true. Nora worked when she could, mending, washing, sometimes cooking for the other boarders. But it was never quite enough. Mrs. Halloway had started giving her those long, measuring looks, the kind that said, "You're a problem I'm tired of solving." "Take the job," Susanna said, pressing the paper into Nora's hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes glittering with malice. "Go out there first thing Monday morning. Tell Mr. Ashford you're here for the position. If you're lucky, maybe he'll actually let you work before he runs you off. If you're really lucky, maybe he won't throw things at your head." "Why are you doing this?" Nora whispered. Susanna's smile didn't waver. "Because we're helping you, Nora. Isn't that what friends do?" They weren't friends. They'd never been friends. But Nora took the paper anyway because she had nowhere else to go, no family to return to, and no other prospects in a town that had decided long ago she was worth less than nothing. That night, lying in her narrow bed in the corner of the attic room she shared with 5 other girls, Nora unfolded the notice and read it by moonlight filtering through the cracked window. Help wanted. Barn work and general ranch maintenance. Serious inquiries only. Must be prepared for hard labor. Daily pay. Apply in person at Ashford Ranch, 3 miles west of town. Ask for Cole Ashford. She traced the words with her fingertip. Serious inquiries only. She wasn't a serious inquiry. She was a punchline. The girls had probably already spent the evening imagining her arrival at the ranch, picturing her stammering and sweating in front of the infamous Cole Ashford, who, according to town legend, had once thrown a man through a fence for stealing his tools. But Holloway had cornered her that very evening, her face pinched and sour. Miss Briggs, I've been patient with you. Heaven knows I've been more than patient. But I run a business, not a charity. If you can't pay your board by Friday, I'll have no choice but to let your bed to someone who can. 5 days. She had 5 days to come up with rent money, or she'd be sleeping under bridges and begging for scraps. Nora folded the paper carefully and tucked it under her pillow. She didn't sleep. She lay awake replaying every cruel word ever said to her, every laugh at her expense, every time someone had looked at her body and decided she was less than human because of it. Fat cow. Waste of space. Who'd ever want her? She eats enough for 3 people. Look at her waddle. Look at her sweat. Look at her try. By the time dawn broke gray and cold over the rooftops, Nora had made her decision. She would go to the Ashford Ranch, not because she believed she'd get the job, she didn't, but because she had to try. Because the alternative was giving up completely, and something stubborn and desperate deep in her chest refused to let her do that. She dressed in her sturdiest skirt and boots, braided her dark hair with shaking fingers, and slipped out of the boarding house before anyone else woke. The streets were empty, the town still asleep. Her breath came out in white puffs as she walked, the paper clutched in her hand like a talisman. 3 miles west. She'd never been that far out of town before. The road turned from cobblestones to packed dirt, lined with scrubby trees and wind-bent grass. The sun rose slowly, casting long shadows across the empty prairie. Nora's feet ached, her chest hurt, but she kept walking. An hour later she saw it. A sprawling ranch with weathered fences, a large barn, and a house that looked like it had been built by someone who valued function over beauty. Smoke rose from the chimney. Horses moved in a distant paddock, and standing in the yard, silhouetted against the rising sun, was a man attacking a broken wagon wheel with an axe. Nora stopped at the gate, her heart hammering. Cole Ashford was tall, taller than any man she'd ever seen, with broad shoulders and arms that corded with muscle as he swung the axe down again and again. His hair was dark, untamed, falling into his eyes. His jaw was set in a hard line, and even from a distance Nora could feel the rage rolling off him in waves. The wheel splintered. Cole threw the axe aside and kicked the wreckage, cursing loud enough for the words to carry across the yard. Nora's hands started to shake. This was a mistake. A terrible, humiliating mistake. She should turn around right now, walk back to town, and figure out something, anything, else. But then Cole looked up and saw her standing there. His expression didn't change. He just stared, his chest heaving, his hands clenched into fists. Then he started walking toward her, his boots crunching on the gravel, his eyes locked on hers. Nora forced herself not to run. She clutched the paper tighter. Cole stopped on the other side of the gate. Up close, he was even more intimidating, not just because of his size, but because of the way he looked at her, not with mockery, not with pity, just cold assessment. "Who are you?" His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. "Nora Briggs, sir." Her voice trembled. "I'm here about the job. The barn work." His eyes narrowed. "Job's been posted for 2 weeks. No one's come out here except jackasses trying to prove something. You don't look like you're trying to prove anything." "I need the work, sir." "Why?" The question caught her off guard. I need the money. For my board." Cole looked her up and down. Not lingering, not leering. Just taking in the threadbare dress, the worn boots, the way she held herself like she was bracing for a blow. "You ever worked on a ranch before?" "No, sir." "You know anything about horses, cattle, mucking stalls, hauling feed?" "No, sir. But I can learn. I'm a hard worker. I don't complain." His jaw tightened. "Who sent you?" Nora's breath caught. "What?" "Who Sent you. Each word was clipped, deliberate. Because I've seen this before. Someone thinks it's funny to send some poor fool out here to see if the crazy rancher will run them off. So who was it? Those idiots from the saloon, the factory boys? Nora's face went hot. She couldn't answer. If she told him about the boarding house girls, he'd know she was a joke. He'd know she was exactly what they said she was, pathetic, desperate, worth laughing at. I need the work, she repeated, her voice barely audible. Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned away, running a hand through his hair. Jesus Christ! He sounded tired. Look, girl. Nora. He glanced back. Nora, I don't run a charity. This is hard work, back-breaking work. I can't have someone fainting in the heat or giving up halfway through the day because they didn't know what they were signing up for. I won't give up. You don't know that. I do. Nora lifted her chin, her hands shaking but her voice steady. I don't have anywhere else to go. I need this job, Mr. Ashford. Please, just give me a chance. One day. If I can't do the work, I'll leave and you'll never see me again. Something shifted in his expression, just for a second, too fast for her to name. Then his face went hard again. One day, he said. You do what I tell you, when I tell you. You don't argue, you don't complain, and you don't waste my time. If you can make it to sundown, I'll pay you. If you can't, you walk home. Understood? Yes, sir. And stop calling me sir. My name's Cole. He turned and walked back toward the barn without waiting to see if she'd follow. Nora stood there for a heartbeat, stunned that he'd actually said yes. Then she hurried after him, her boots kicking up dust, her heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to hope. The barn was massive and smelled like hay and horses and sweat. Cole led her through the main doors into a long corridor lined with stalls. Horses watched them pass with liquid eyes. Tools hung on the walls, pitchforks, shovels, coils of rope. First job, Cole said, pointing to a stall that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in days. Muck that out. Wheelbarrows over there. Fresh straws in the corner. Get to it. He handed her a pitchfork and walked away before she could respond. Nora stared at the stall. The smell alone was overwhelming. Manure piled in the corners, soiled straw everywhere. She'd never done anything like this in her life. But she'd promised she wouldn't give up. She rolled up her sleeves, grabbed the pitchfork, and got to work. It was worse than she'd imagined. The pitchfork was heavy, the manure stubborn, and her arms burned within minutes. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Her back screamed. But she kept going, scooping and hauling, dumping load after load into the wheelbarrow and rolling it outside to the manure pile Cole had pointed out. By the time she finished the first stall, her hands were blistered and her dress was filthy. She leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, her vision swimming. Cole appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. He looked at the stall, then at her. Not bad, he said. 10 more to go. Nora's stomach dropped. 10? Did I stutter? She shook her head and picked up the pitchfork again. Cole watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and walked away. Nora worked through the morning in a haze of exhaustion and pain. Every muscle in her body ached. Her hands bled. Her lungs burned. But she kept going because stopping meant going back to the boarding house, to the laughter, to the attic bed she'd lose by Friday. Around noon, Cole reappeared. He didn't say anything, just set a tin cup of water and a hunk of bread on the fence post near where she was working. Then he left again. Nora stared at the water like it was a miracle. She drank it in 3 gulps and ate the bread so fast she nearly choked. Then she went back to work. She finished 6 stalls by mid-afternoon. Her vision blurred. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the pitchfork. But she kept going. That's when she heard the voices. Well, 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 look who actually showed up. Nora's blood turned to ice. She looked up to see Susanna, Betty, and Lila standing at the barn entrance, all dressed in their Sunday best, all wearing identical smirks. We had to see it for ourselves, Susanna said, strolling into the barn like she owned it. Nora Briggs, working on a ranch. Actually working. I didn't think you had it in you. Leave me alone, Nora said quietly, turning back to the stall. Oh, we're just checking on you, Nora. Making sure you're all right. Making sure the big scary rancher hasn't eaten you alive. Lila's laugh was high and cruel. Does he know? Betty asked, leaning against a stall door. Does he know we sent you here as a joke? That we told everyone in town we were sending the fattest girl we could find to the meanest man we knew just to see what would happen? Nora's hands tightened on the pitchfork. Get out. We will, Susanna said sweetly, just as soon as we get a good look at you. God, Nora, you're even sweatier and filthier than usual. Does he make you work like a mule? Is that what you're good for now? I said get out. Or what? Susanna stepped closer, her eyes glittering. You'll hit me with that pitchfork? Go ahead. Give us a reason to have you arrested. Give us... Leave. The voice came from behind them, low and dangerous. All three girls spun around. Cole stood in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the sun, his face carved from stone. This is private property, he said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. You're trespassing. We're just visiting our friend, Susanna said, but her smile faltered. She's not your friend. You sent her here as a joke. I know. She knows. Now you know that I know. So get the hell off my land before I make you. Betty grabbed Susanna's arm. Come on, let's go. But Susanna wasn't done. She looked at Nora, her face twisted with something ugly. You're pathetic, Nora. You know that? You'll do anything, work yourself to death, just to avoid admitting that you're exactly what we say you are. Worthless. Cole moved so fast Nora barely saw it. He crossed the barn in 3 strides and stopped inches from Susanna, towering over her, his fists clenched. Get out. This time they ran. Nora stood frozen, her heart pounding, as the sound of their footsteps faded. Cole didn't look at her. He just walked over to the water barrel, filled the tin cup again, and brought it to her. Drink, he said. Nora took the cup with shaking hands. You didn't have to... Yeah, I did. He turned away. Finish the stalls, then come to the house. I'll have supper ready. He walked out before she could respond. Nora stood there, the tin cup cold in her hands, tears burning behind her eyes. For the first time in longer than she could remember, someone had stood up for her. Not because they pitied her, not because they wanted something from her, just because it was the right thing to do. She drained the cup, set it down, and picked up the pitchfork. She had 4 stalls left. By the time the sun dipped low on the horizon, Nora had finished all 10 stalls. Her body was a symphony of pain. Her hands were raw. Her back felt like it might snap. But she'd done it. She found Cole in the yard tending to a horse with a gentle patience that didn't match his reputation at all. He glanced up when she approached. Finished? Yes. He nodded, ran a hand down the horse's neck, and headed toward the house. Come on. The house was small but clean, with a stone fireplace and a scarred wooden table. A pot hung over the fire, bubbling with something that smelled like heaven. Cole ladled stew into 2 bowls and set them on the table. Sit. Nora sat, too exhausted to argue. Cole sat across from her and started eating without ceremony. Nora picked up her spoon and tasted the stew. It was simple. Potatoes, carrots, a little beef, but it was the best thing she'd tasted in months. They ate in silence. Cole didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk, just ate. When they were done, he pushed a small leather pouch across the table. Your pay. Nora opened it and stared. It was more than she'd expected, more than she'd make in a week at the boarding house doing mending. This is too much, she said. No, it's not. You did the work. That's what I pay. Nora's throat tightened. Thank you. Cole looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she'd arrived. His eyes were dark, hard, but not unkind. You worked harder than any man I've hired in the last year, he said. You didn't complain, didn't quit. Most people can't say that. I needed the job. I know. He leaned back in his chair. Those girls, the ones who came today, they the ones who sent you here? Nora nodded. They do that kind of thing a lot? Yes. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then, you planning to go back there tonight? I have to. It's where I live. For now. He stood and started clearing the table. You need work tomorrow? Nora's heart leaped. You're offering me another day? If you want it. Yes. Yes, I do. Then be here at dawn. There's always work on a ranch. He paused, his back to her. And Nora? Those girls come back, you tell me. Nobody gets to treat you like that on my land. Understood? Nora's vision blurred. Understood. The walk back to town felt different, lighter. The money in her pocket was proof that she could do hard things, that she was worth something. When she reached the boarding house, the other girls were gathered in the parlor. They looked up when she walked in, their faces full of gleeful anticipation. Nora! Susanna's voice was syrupy. You're alive. Tell us everything. Did he yell at you? Did he throw things? Nora walked past her without a word, climbed the stairs to the attic, and lay down on her narrow bed. Behind her, the girls whispered and laughed. But Nora didn't care anymore, because tomorrow she'd wake up at dawn and walk 3 miles west to a ranch where someone had looked at her and seen not a joke, but a worker, a person. And that was worth every blister, every ache, every cruel word she'd ever endured. Outside, the stars came out one by one, cold and bright and infinite. And for the first time in her life, Nora Briggs fell asleep with something that felt like hope. The next morning, Nora was gone before the sun rose. She walked the 3 miles west with her shoulders back and her head high, the memory of Cole's words. You worked harder than any man I've hired, playing on repeat in her mind. When she arrived at the ranch, Cole was already working, hauling feed sacks from the barn to the storage shed. He glanced up when he heard her footsteps. You're early. I didn't want to be late. He nodded toward the barn. Start with the stalls again. Then there's fence mending on the south pasture. I'll show you. Nora worked through the morning with the same grim determination as the day before. Her hands still hurt, her back still screamed, but her body was learning, getting stronger. The blisters hardened, the muscles adapted. Cole worked alongside her sometimes, silent and efficient. Other times he disappeared to tend to other parts of the ranch, leaving her to figure things out on her own. He didn't coddle her, didn't offer sympathy, but he also didn't mock her when she struggled or made mistakes. Around midday, as Nora was hauling water to the horses, a wagon rolled up the road to the ranch. Cole's entire body went rigid. Nora looked up and saw 3 men climbing down from the wagon, rough-looking, with leering grins and eyes that crawled over her like insects. Well, well, the tallest one said, tipping his hat in mock politeness. Cole Ashford, heard you got yourself some help. Cole stepped between them and Nora. What do you want, Harris? Harris's grin widened. Just came to see for ourselves. The whole town's talking about it. Cole Ashford, the man who scares off every ranch hand in the territory, finally found someone desperate enough to work for him. Though I gotta say, Cole, I didn't expect you to hire a woman, especially not... Well... He looked past Cole at Nora and laughed. Let's just say we were all taking bets on how long she'd last. The other 2 men snickered. Cole's voice dropped to a growl. Get off my property. Oh, come on, Cole, we're just having a little fun. We heard those boarding house girls sent her out here as a joke. Is that true? Did they really think it'd be funny to... Cole moved. His fist connected with Harris's jaw with a crack that echoed across the yard. Harris went down hard, spitting blood. The other 2 men froze. Cole stood over Harris, his chest heaving. I said get off my property, and tell your friends. Anyone who comes out here to make fun of my worker gets the same treatment. Now go. They went. Nora stood there, her heart pounding, as the wagon disappeared down the road. Cole turned to her, his knuckles bloody. You all right? You didn't have to do that, Nora whispered. Yeah, I did. He wiped his hand on his pants. Back to work. And just like that, he walked away. But Nora stayed rooted to the spot, staring after him, something warm and unfamiliar blooming in her chest. No one had ever fought for her before. Not once. Not ever. And now this angry, damaged rancher, the man the whole town feared, had done it twice. She picked up the water bucket and went back to work, but everything felt different now. The world had spent 19 years telling Nora Briggs she was worthless, but Cole Ashford was starting to prove them wrong. The days began to blur together in a way that felt less like exhaustion and more like rhythm. Nora woke before dawn each morning, slipped out of the boarding house while the other girls still slept, and walked the 3 miles west as the sky shifted from black to gray to pale gold. Her boots knew the path now. Her body had learned to carry itself differently. Not with shame, but with purpose. Cole never greeted her with pleasantries. He'd nod, gesture toward whatever needed doing, and they'd work in a silence that felt less cold each day. She mucked stalls, hauled hay, mended fences under his terse instruction. He showed her once how to do something, expected her to remember, and moved on. It was harsh teaching, but it was honest, and Nora found herself learning faster than she'd ever learned anything in her life. On the fifth day, as she was spreading fresh straw in the last stall, Cole appeared with a pair of worn leather gloves. "Here," he said, tossing them to her. "Your hands look like raw meat." Nora caught them, startled. The gloves were too big but well made, the leather soft from years of use. "These are yours. I've got others. Keep them." "I can't." "You want to work with bleeding hands. That's your choice. But infected wounds slow you down, and I need the work done." He turned away. "There's salve in the house. Use it." It wasn't kindness, the way he said it, but it wasn't cruelty either. It was something in between, practical care wrapped in gruff indifference, the kind of consideration a man might show a valuable tool he didn't want to see ruined. Nora pulled on the gloves. They smelled like leather and wood smoke and something else she couldn't name. She flexed her fingers, feeling the pain in her palms ease just slightly. "Thank you," she called after him. Cole didn't turn around, but his shoulders shifted in what might have been acknowledgement. That afternoon, Nora was hauling feed sacks from the barn to the storage shed when she heard hoofbeats. She looked up to see a woman riding toward the ranch. Elegant, blonde, her riding habit perfectly tailored. Everything about her screamed money and breeding. The woman reined in her horse and dismounted with practiced grace, her eyes sweeping over the ranch before landing on Nora. Her expression shifted from curiosity to poorly concealed disdain. "You must be the new help," she said, her voice honeyed but sharp underneath. "Where's Cole?" "In the south pasture, ma'am, mending fence." The woman's lips pursed. "I see. And you are?" "Nora Briggs." "Nora." The woman repeated the name like she was tasting something unpleasant. "I'm Virginia Ashford, Cole's sister-in-law. Well, former sister-in-law, I suppose, though we still consider ourselves family." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I've come to bring Cole some preserves. Would you be a dear and fetch him? I don't want to muddy my skirts trudging through fields." Nora set down the feed sack. "Of course, ma'am." She found Cole exactly where she'd said he would be, stripped down to his undershirt, sweat gleaming on his arms as he worked to replace a rotted fence post. He looked up at her approach, his expression shifting from concentration to wariness. "What is it?" "There's a woman at the house. Says she's Virginia Ashford. I know who she is." Cole's jaw tightened. He wiped his hands on his pants and started walking back toward the ranch, his stride long and tense. Nora followed, confused by the sudden change in his demeanor. Virginia was standing by the porch, holding a basket covered with a checkered cloth. Her smile brightened when she saw Cole, but Nora noticed it didn't soften the calculation in her eyes. "Cole, it's been too long. I brought you some of my plum preserves. You always loved them." "That was Robert who loved them," Cole said flatly. "Not me." Something flickered across Virginia's face, hurt, or maybe just irritation at being corrected. "Well, regardless, I thought you might enjoy them. And I wanted to see how you were doing. The ranch looks busy." "It's a working ranch." "Yes, I can see that." Virginia glanced at Nora, who was standing awkwardly by the barn. "I heard you'd hired someone. The whole town's talking about it, you know. People are curious. People should mind their own damn business." Virginia's laugh was light and artificial. "Oh, Cole. Always so prickly. I'm just concerned about you, that's all. Living out here alone, no family nearby, no proper society. It's not healthy. Robert would want—" "Don't." Cole's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't talk about what Robert would want." Virginia's composure cracked just slightly. "He was my husband, Cole. I have every right to—" "He was my brother, and he's been dead 3 years. So take your preserves and your concern and go back to town, Virginia." The silence that followed was terrible. Virginia's face had gone white, her hands gripping the basket so hard her knuckles showed bone. For a moment, Nora thought she might throw it at him. Instead, she set it carefully on the porch step and straightened her skirts. "You've always been cruel, Cole." Robert saw the good in you, God knows why. But I never could. Her eyes flicked to Nora. Good luck with your new arrangement. I'm sure it will work out exactly as well as everything else in your life. She mounted her horse with jerky, angry movements and rode away without looking back. Cole stood motionless, staring at the dust cloud her horse kicked up. His hands were clenched into fists, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he wouldn't let himself say. Nora approached cautiously. Are you all right? Get back to work. Cole, I said get back to work. The words cracked like a whip. Nora flinched but didn't move. She'd seen enough anger in her life to know the difference between rage that wanted to hurt and rage that was trying desperately not to break. What happened to your brother? She asked quietly. Cole's head snapped toward her, his eyes blazing. What? Your brother, Robert, what happened to him? That's none of your goddamn business. You're right. It's not. Nora took a breath. But you stood up for me when no one else ever has. You gave me work when I was desperate. You drove off men who came here to mock me. So if you need someone to listen, I don't need anything from you except work. Cole's voice was harsh, but something in his eyes looked trapped, desperate. You're here to earn your pay, not to fix me. I don't need fixing. I don't need listening to. I need you to do what I hired you to do and stay out of my life beyond that. Understand? Nora nodded slowly. I understand. She turned and walked back to the barn, her chest tight. Behind her, she heard a crash, Cole kicking the basket of preserves off the porch, glass shattering against stone. She worked through the rest of the afternoon in heavy silence. Cole disappeared somewhere on the ranch, and when evening came, there was no call to supper, no pay left on the fence post. Just emptiness and the sound of wind through the grass. Nora walked home as the sun set, her heart heavier than it had been in days. She'd overstepped, pushed too hard. Tomorrow he might tell her not to come back, and she'd be right back where she started, desperate, alone, worthless. But the next morning, when she arrived at the ranch, Cole was waiting by the barn. He didn't look at her directly, but he held out a tin cup of coffee. It's cold out, he said gruffly. Drink this before you start. Nora took the cup, wrapping her hands around its warmth. Thank you. Cole nodded once and walked away. It wasn't an apology. She suspected he didn't know how to make those, but it was acknowledgement. She'd pushed, but he hadn't pushed back hard enough to break her. They worked through the morning in their usual silence, but something had shifted. Around noon, as they were taking a water break in the shade of the barn, Cole spoke without looking at her. Robert died in a riding accident. Horse spooked, threw him. He hit his head on a rock. His voice was flat, emotionless. Virginia blames me because I sold him that horse. Said I should have known it was too spirited. Maybe she's right. Nora set down her water cup carefully. Do you think she's right? Doesn't matter what I think. He's dead either way. It matters. Cole finally looked at her, his dark eyes searching. Why do you care? Because you cared when those girls came to mock me. Because you cared when those men rode out here making bets. Because you gave me gloves for my hands and coffee when it's cold. Nora met his gaze steadily. Because nobody's just one thing. Not you, not me. The town says you're mean and I'm worthless, but I don't think either of us believes that anymore. Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. He was the only person who ever gave a damn about me. Our father was... He stopped, his jaw working. Robert was the good one, the one everyone loved. And I'm the one who's still here. That's not your fault. Virginia thinks it is. Half the town thinks it is. Hell, maybe they're right. They're not. Nora's voice was firm. Bad things happen, Cole. People die in accidents. That doesn't mean someone has to be blamed for it. You sound pretty sure about that for someone who lets a pack of vicious girls make her life hell. The words stung, but there was no malice in them, just observation. Nora looked down at her hands, at the calluses forming on her palms despite the gloves. You're right, she admitted. I let them. Every day I let them. Because I believed what they said about me. That I was too fat, too ugly, too worthless to deserve better. She looked up. But working here with you, it's the first time I've felt like maybe they were wrong. Maybe I'm worth more than I thought. Cole's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You work harder than any man I've ever hired. That's worth something. So is not selling someone a dangerous horse to hurt them. If that horse was spirited and your brother was a good rider, then it was an accident, a terrible, unfair accident, but not your fault. Cole looked away, his throat working. Virginia was pregnant when he died, lost the baby 2 months later from the grief. So I didn't just kill my brother, I killed his child too, his whole future, everything good he could have done in this world. Cole, no. She's right to hate me. They're all right to hate me. I've got my father's temper, his rage. Every man I've hired has quit or I've run them off. I break everything I touch. His voice cracked. You should quit too. Before I ruin you like I ruin everything else. Nora stood up, her hands clenched into fists. No. Cole looked at her startled. No, she repeated. I'm not quitting. You want to wallow in guilt that isn't yours? Fine. You want to believe you're poisoned. That's your choice. But I've spent 19 years believing I was worthless, and I'm done with it. I'm done letting other people tell me what I am. Her voice shook. And I'm not going to stand here and let you tell yourself something that isn't true either. You didn't kill your brother. You didn't kill his child. Life is cruel and random, and sometimes good people die for no reason. But that doesn't make you responsible. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not. But I know what it's like to carry blame that doesn't belong to you. I know what it's like to hate yourself so much you can't see straight. And I know that you're the first person in my entire life who looked at me and saw something other than a fat girl to laugh at. Tears burned in her eyes. So no, I'm not quitting. And you can yell at me or push me away or kick me off this ranch, but I'm going to come back tomorrow anyway, because I need this job, yes, but also because… She stopped, her voice breaking. Because I think maybe you need someone who doesn't run away. The silence stretched between them, taut and fragile. Then Cole stood up, turned away from her, and walked toward the barn. Nora's heart sank. She'd gone too far, said too much. He was done with her. But then his voice drifted back, rough and low. South pasture fence still needs finishing. You coming or not? Nora grabbed her gloves and hurried after him. They worked side by side until sunset, not speaking, but the silence felt different now, less like walls and more like understanding. When evening came and the work was done, Cole pressed her pay into her hand along with something else, a small cloth bundle. What's this? Leftover cornbread from last night. You're losing weight. Nora blinked. What? You're eating enough to keep working, but not enough to keep healthy. Take it. She unwrapped the cloth. The cornbread was still slightly warm, buttered and crumbling. Her throat tightened. Thank you. Cole nodded brusquely. Same time tomorrow. Same time tomorrow, Nora agreed. She walked home under a sky full of stars, eating the cornbread in small bites, each one tasting like care given grudgingly, but given nonetheless. When she reached the boarding house, the parlor lights were still on. She could hear the girls inside laughing about something. Once, that sound would have made her stomach clench with dread. Now it just felt distant, unimportant. She climbed the stairs to the attic, counted out the money she'd earned so far, and realized she had enough now. Enough for her back rent and 2 weeks ahead. Enough to secure her bed, her place, her small corner of safety. But as she lay down that night, she didn't think about the money, or the bed, or even the boarding house. She thought about Cole's voice, rough and broken. You should quit before I ruin you. And her own voice, stronger than she'd ever heard it. No. Something was changing, not just in how she saw herself, but in how she saw him. The angry rancher was still angry, still damaged, still carrying wounds that hadn't healed. But underneath all that rage and guilt was a man who gave her coffee when it was cold and cornbread when she was hungry. A man who defended her against mockery and taught her to work with patient, grudging respect. A man who was just as broken as she was and just as desperate to prove he was worth something. The next morning came cold and bright. Nora arrived at the ranch to find Cole already working, but this time he was building something in the yard, a rough wooden bench near the barn entrance. What's that for? She asked. Lunch break. You keep sitting on the ground like some kind of animal. Nora watched him work for a moment, saw the careful way he fitted the boards together, the precision despite his rough hands. It's nice, she said quietly. It's functional. But when he finished and stood back to look at it, there was something almost shy in his expression, like a man unaccustomed to making things instead of breaking them. They fell into their work routine, but the day felt different, lighter. Cole showed her how to repair a broken bridle, his hands patient as he demonstrated the knots. When she got it wrong twice, he didn't snap at her, just showed her again, slower. "You're getting better at this," he said as she finally managed the repair correctly. "Another week you'll be able to handle most of the leather work yourself." Pride bloomed warm in Nora's chest. "Really? I don't say things I don't mean." Around midday, as they were watering the horses, a lone rider appeared on the road. This time it wasn't Virginia or mocking ranch hands. It was Mrs. Halloway from the boarding house, her face pinched with disapproval, her posture rigid. Nora's stomach dropped. Mrs. Halloway dismounted with difficulty and marched across the yard like she owned it. Her eyes found Nora immediately, sharp and accusatory. "Miss Briggs, a word, if you please." Nora glanced at Cole, who had gone very still. "Yes, ma'am?" "Not here. This is a private matter." "Anything you have to say to her, you can say in front of me," Cole said, his voice cold. "This is my property." Mrs. Halloway's nostrils flared. "Very well. Miss Briggs, I've come to inform you that your services are no longer required at my establishment. I'm letting your bed to a girl with better prospects and more appropriate behavior." Nora felt the world tilt. "What? But I paid my back rent. I'm current through next week." "The money is irrelevant. I run a respectable boarding house, Miss Briggs, not a way station for women of questionable character." Mrs. Halloway's voice dripped with judgment. "It has come to my attention that you've been spending your days alone with an unmarried man, working in circumstances that are, shall we say, compromising. I cannot have my establishment associated with such scandal." "There's no scandal," Nora said, her voice shaking. "I'm working. Honest work. You know I needed... What I know is that you leave before dawn and return after dark, smelling of horses and sweat, working alongside a man with a violent reputation. The other girls have expressed concern. Their families have expressed concern. And frankly, Miss Briggs, your presence is becoming more trouble than it's worth." Cole stepped forward, his face dark with anger. "She's done nothing wrong. She works harder than any man in this territory. If you're throwing her out because of small-minded gossip, Mr. Ashford, I don't recall asking for your opinion. Miss Briggs is free to work wherever she chooses, but she will not be living under my roof while doing so. I've already had her belongings packed." Mrs. Halloway pulled a small carpet bag from her saddle and dropped it on the ground. "There. Now our business is concluded." "You can't do this," Nora whispered. "I have nowhere else to go." "That's hardly my concern. Perhaps you should have thought of that before choosing to associate with..." Mrs. Halloway looked Cole up and down with naked contempt. "Undesirable company. Good day, Miss Briggs. I wish you luck in your future endeavors." She mounted her horse and rode away without another word, leaving Nora standing frozen in the yard, staring at the carpetbag that contained everything she owned in the world. The silence was crushing. "Nora," Cole started. "I have to go," she said, her voice hollow. "I have to find somewhere. There must be somewhere." "Where?" Cole's voice was harsh. "You know this town. You know how they talk. By tonight, everyone will know you've been working here alone with me. No respectable house will take you. No family will hire you. Then I'll sleep outside, under bridges. I don't care." "The hell you will." Cole grabbed her arm, not hard but firm. "Listen to me. You're not sleeping under bridges. You're not begging on street corners. You're not giving them that satisfaction." "Then what am I supposed to do?" Nora's voice cracked, tears finally spilling over. "I have nothing. I am nothing. They were right all along." "No." Cole's hands gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "They were never right. They sent you here as a joke, and you turned it into honest work. They laughed at you, and you proved them wrong. They called you worthless, and you showed them what worth really looks like. Don't you dare let them win now." "But I have nowhere to go. Stay here." The words hung in the air between them like something alive and dangerous. Nora stared at him. "What?" "Stay here, on the ranch." Cole's jaw was tight, his eyes fierce. "There's a spare room in the house. Was Robert's when he'd visit. It's not much, but it's clean and warm, and it's yours if you want it. Cole, I can't. People will say, let them say whatever the hell they want. They already think the worst of both of us. At least this way you've got a roof over your head and steady work. His hands dropped from her shoulders. This isn't. He struggled with the words. I'm offering you a place to sleep and fair pay for fair work. Nothing else. But you need somewhere safe, and I need a worker I can trust. So if you want it, it's yours. Nora's mind spun. Everything in her screamed that this was improper, scandalous, exactly the kind of thing that would destroy her reputation forever. But her reputation was already destroyed. Mrs. Halloway had seen to that. And Cole was right. She had nowhere else to go. Why? She asked, her voice barely audible. Why would you do this for me? Cole looked away, his jaw working. Because someone should have done it sooner. Because you deserve better than what this town's given you. Because... He stopped, then forced himself to continue. Because you're the first person in 3 years who's looked at me like I'm more than my worst moment, and maybe I want to return the favor. Nora felt something break open in her chest, something that had been locked tight for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying, beautiful hope. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll stay. Cole nodded once, quick and decisive, like he had to commit to the decision before he could second-guess himself. He picked up her carpet bag. Come on, I'll show you the room. The house was small and spare, but it was clean. Cole led her down a short hallway to a door she'd never noticed before. Inside was a simple room with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the south pasture. Sunlight streamed through glass that was miraculously uncracked. It's not much, Cole said, setting her bag on the bed. But it's warm in winter and the roof doesn't leak. You can do whatever you want with it. Nora turned in a slow circle, taking it in. Her own room. Not a corner of an attic shared with 5 cruel girls. Not a bed she might lose any week she couldn't scrape together rent. Her own space. Her own door she could close. It's perfect, she said, her voice thick. Cole cleared his throat. Right. Well, supper's at sundown. You're welcome to eat with me or take it to your room, whichever you prefer. House rules are simple. Clean up after yourself, don't waste food, and don't go through my things. That's it. Thank you, Cole. He looked uncomfortable, like gratitude was a language he didn't speak. Just pull your weight and we'll call it even. Now come on, we've still got half a day's work left, and those fences won't mend themselves. They walked back outside together, into the bright afternoon sun, and Nora felt something settle in her bones, something that felt like belonging. Behind them, the door to her room stood open, a small space that was entirely, completely, undeniably hers. And ahead of her stretched the ranch, the work, the steady rhythm of a life she was building one blistered hand, one mended fence, one quiet kindness at a time. The town had tried to break her. Instead, they'd set her free. The first week of living on the ranch passed in a blur of work and careful distance. Nora kept to her room in the evenings, taking her supper on a tray and eating alone while Cole sat at the kitchen table with his own plate. They moved around each other like dancers learning new steps, polite, cautious, hyper-aware of every boundary. Cole knocked before entering any room she might be in. Nora made sure to be dressed and presentable before dawn. They didn't talk about anything beyond the work at hand, but the work itself was changing her. Nora's arms grew stronger, her hands tougher. She learned to anticipate what Cole needed before he asked for it, to read his moods in the set of his shoulders or the tightness around his eyes. She learned which horses were gentle and which needed a firm hand, how to tell when a fence post was rotted just by looking at it, how to mix feed and measure grain and stack hay so it wouldn't mold. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the silences between them became less about avoidance and more about comfort. On the 8th day, Nora woke before dawn as usual, but found the kitchen already warm, a pot of coffee brewing on the stove. Cole was at the table, mending a bridle by lamplight. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself a cup. "Couldn't sleep." He didn't look up from his work. "There's bread in the box and butter in the cold cellar if you want breakfast." Nora cut 2 thick slices of bread and buttered them both, setting one on the table near Cole's elbow. He glanced at it, then at her, something unreadable flickering across his face. "Thanks," he muttered. They ate in silence, but it was the first meal they'd shared in the same room since she'd moved in. When they finished and headed out to start the day's work, Nora felt like something small but significant had shifted. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of day where the sky stretched forever and the air tasted clean. They were working together to replace several sections of the corral fence when Nora heard the sound of multiple horses approaching. Her stomach clenched. Nothing good ever came from unexpected visitors. Cole heard them too. He straightened, his hand tightening on the post driver, his eyes scanning the road. A moment later, 6 riders appeared, rough men Nora recognized from town, the kind who spent their days at the saloon and their nights causing trouble. Leading them was Harris, the man Cole had punched weeks ago. His jaw was still slightly swollen, yellowed with the remnants of a bruise. "Ashford!" Harris called out, reining in his horse at the property line. The other men fanned out behind him, all wearing the same ugly grins. "We need to talk." Cole set down the post driver carefully and walked toward them, his movements deliberate. Nora started to follow, but he held up a hand without looking back. "Stay there." She stopped but kept watching, her heart pounding. "What do you want, Harris?" Cole's voice carried across the yard, cold and sharp. "Just being neighborly," Harris said, though his smile was anything but friendly. "See, word's gotten around that you're keeping that boarding house girl here. Living under your roof. Sleeping in your house." He paused, letting the implications hang heavy in the air. "Now, I'm not one to judge a man's private business, but some folks in town are getting concerned, talking about propriety and such. Wondering if maybe we should come out here and make sure the girl's being treated right." "She's being treated fine. Now get off my property." "See, that's the thing, Cole. We can't just take your word for it. You've got a reputation, hot temper, violent tendencies. What's to stop you from hurting that girl? Or worse?" Harris leaned forward in his saddle. "We figure we ought to check on her welfare, make sure she's not being forced into anything unnatural." The other men chuckled, and Nora felt her face burn with humiliation. They weren't here out of concern. They were here to mock, to intimidate, to turn her life into another joke for the whole town to laugh at. "Nora works here. She lives here because she has nowhere else to go, thanks to Mrs. Halloway throwing her out based on gossip from small-minded idiots like you." Cole's voice was low and dangerous. "She's treated with respect, she's paid fair wages, and what happens on my ranch is none of your goddamn business." "So you admit she's living with you? Unmarried man and unmarried woman under one roof?" Harris looked at his companions. "Boys, I think we've got ourselves a situation here. The good folks of town ain't gonna like hearing about this." "The good folks of town can go to hell. Now, Cole, there's no need to be hostile. We're just trying to help. Maybe the girl don't know what kind of trouble she's getting into, living out here with a man like you. Maybe she needs to hear some truth about who you really are." Harris's eyes found Nora. "You know about his daddy, girl? You know Robert Ashford Sr. used to beat his boys bloody? You know Cole here learned everything he knows about anger from a man who once broke his wife's arm for burning dinner?" "Shut your mouth," Cole growled. "You know Cole's got that same rage in him? That it's only a matter of time before he turns on you? Hell, he already broke my jaw for making a simple joke. What do you think he'll do when you burn his supper or talk back or—" Cole moved faster than Nora had ever seen him move. He crossed the distance to Harris's horse in 3 strides, grabbed the man by his jacket, and hauled him out of the saddle. Harris hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him. "I warned you," Cole said quietly, standing over him. "I warned all of you. But you keep coming back, keep running your mouths, keep trying to make her life hell for your entertainment." Harris scrambled backward, his eyes wide with genuine fear now. "You're proving my point, Ashford. Look at you. Out of control, violent. I'm controlled enough not to break every bone in your face, which is more than you deserve." Cole's fists were clenched so tight they shook. "But I'm done being polite. I'm done warning you off. This is the last time. You come back here, any of you, and I won't just throw you off my land. I'll make sure you regret ever hearing my name." One of the other riders, a younger man Nora didn't recognize, spoke up nervously. "We're just worried about the girl, Cole. If she's really here of her own free will—" "I am." Everyone turned to look at Nora. She walked forward slowly, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "I'm here of my own free will. Mr. Ashford has never hurt me, never threatened me, never done anything improper. He gave me work when I was desperate. He defended me when people came to mock me. And when I had nowhere else to go, he gave me a room and asked nothing in return except honest work. She looked at Harris, still sprawled on the ground. You want to know who's treated me badly? Mrs. Halloway, who threw me out to protect her reputation. The boarding house girls who sent me here as a cruel joke. Men like you who ride out here pretending to care about my welfare when really you just want an excuse to harass Mr. Ashford and humiliate me. Girl, you don't understand, Harris started. No, you don't understand. Nora's voice rose, surprising even herself. I'm 19 years old. I can make my own decisions. And I've decided to stay here and work. If that bothers you, if that offends your sense of propriety, then maybe you should look at why you care so much about what two people do on their own property when it's none of your business. The silence that followed was profound. The men shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. Harris got slowly to his feet, brushing dirt from his clothes, his face red with embarrassment and anger. You're making a mistake, he said to Nora. Both of you are. This won't end well. Get off my land, Cole said flatly. Now. They went. But as they rode away, Nora heard them talking amongst themselves, their voices carrying on the wind, words like shameful and scandalous and ruined. She felt her brief surge of courage crumble. They're going to tell everyone, she whispered. By tonight, the whole town will know I'm living here. They'll think. Let them think whatever they want. Cole's voice was rough. He was still staring after the departing riders, his jaw tight. You told the truth. That's all that matters. But your reputation, my reputation's been trashed since I was born. One more scandal won't make a difference. He finally looked at her, and there was something fierce in his eyes. But yours, Nora, I didn't think about what this would cost you. Having you live here, I just wanted to give you somewhere safe. I didn't think about how the town would twist it. There's nothing to twist. We're not doing anything wrong. Doesn't matter. In their eyes, we're guilty just by being under the same roof. Cole ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Maybe you should go back to town. Find another boarding house, somewhere they don't know you. Start fresh. No. Nora, no. She crossed her arms, channeling the same stubborn strength that had gotten her through 3 weeks of backbreaking work. I'm not running away because small-minded people want to make me a scandal. I'm not giving up the first place I've ever felt safe, the first work I've ever been proud of, because of gossip. Let them talk. Let them think the worst. I know the truth, you know the truth, and that's enough. Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, something like respect crossed his face. You're tougher than I gave you credit for. I had a good teacher. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Come on, that fence won't fix itself, and I'm not letting Harris and his idiots ruin a whole day's work. They went back to the corral, back to the steady rhythm of labor. But Nora couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed again, something bigger this time. She'd stood up for herself. She'd chosen Cole's rough kindness over the town's false respectability, and in doing so, she'd tied her fate to his in a way that couldn't be undone. That evening, as they sat down to supper, this time both at the kitchen table, the pretense of separation abandoned, Cole cleared his throat. I've been thinking, he said, not meeting her eyes, about what those men said, about propriety and such. Nora's stomach sank. If you want me to leave, no, opposite, actually. He set down his fork and finally looked at her. I'm thinking we should make it official, proper. What do you mean? Marriage. The word came out rough, almost angry. Not a real one, it would be real legally, but it would be an arrangement, for protection, yours and mine. If we're married, they can't say anything. You'd be my wife living in my house because that's where wives live. It'd shut them up. Nora felt like all the air had been sucked from the room. You want to marry me? As an arrangement? It makes sense. Cole was talking faster now, like he had to get it all out before he lost his nerve. You need security. I need the gossip to stop before it ruins what we've built here. It'd be a business arrangement, same as you working here. Separate rooms, no expectations, just a legal protection. Cole, Nora's voice was soft. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to save my reputation. I'm not sacrificing anything. And it's not just your reputation, it's mine too. Virginia's already spreading poison about me, saying I'm dangerous, that I'm taking advantage of you. If we're married, she can't use you against me, and the town can't use me against you. But marriage, that's permanent. I know what it is. Cole's hands clenched on the table. Look, I'm not asking you to love me or even like me. I'm asking you to let me protect you the only way I know how. With a legal document that says you're supposed to be here, that there's nothing improper about it. You'd have my name, my property, everything. If something happens to me, the ranch would be yours. You'd never have to worry about being thrown out or losing your home again. Nora's mind raced. It was insane. It was practical. It was the most generous thing anyone had ever offered her, wrapped in the gruffest possible package. What would you get out of it? She asked quietly. Cole looked away, his jaw working. Someone who doesn't run away. Someone who sees past the angry rancher everyone's scared of. Someone who... He stopped, then forced himself to continue. Someone who makes this place feel less empty. The honesty of it pierced her heart. He wasn't offering romance or pretty words. He was offering the raw truth of his loneliness and her homelessness, and suggesting they fill those empty spaces for each other. I need time to think, Nora said. Cole nodded quickly. Of course. Take all the time you need. It's a big decision. I know that. I wanted you to know it was an option. That's all. They finished supper in silence, but it was charged now, heavy with possibility and fear, and something neither of them wanted to name. That night, lying in her small room listening to the wind outside, Nora tried to imagine it. Being Cole Ashford's wife, living here not as a worker, but as a partner, having a legal right to this place that had become more home than anywhere she'd ever lived. But marriage without love, could that work? Could they build something real from such practical foundations? She thought about Cole's hands, rough but careful, fixing the fence. His gruff voice saying, "You work harder than any man I've hired." The way he'd stood between her and every person who tried to hurt her. The coffee he made in the mornings, the gloves he'd given her, the room he'd offered without asking for anything in return. Maybe it wasn't love. Not yet. But it was care and respect, and the kind of solid dependability she'd never known existed. Maybe that was enough to build on. The next morning, she found Cole in the barn before dawn, mucking stalls like he'd been awake for hours. He looked up when she entered, his expression guarded. "I'll do it," Nora said. He straightened slowly. "Do what?" "Marry you. If you're sure. If you really think it's the right thing." Cole set down his pitchfork, his face unreadable. "You're sure? You understand what you're agreeing to? Once we do this, the whole town will know. There's no taking it back." "I understand." Nora stepped closer. "And I know it's just an arrangement. I know you're doing this to protect me, not because you—" She couldn't finish that sentence. "But I want to say yes anyway. Because you're right. It makes sense. And because I trust you, Cole, more than I've ever trusted anyone." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or gratitude, or something deeper he wouldn't let himself show. "All right, then." His voice was rough. "We'll go into town tomorrow. Get the license. Find someone to perform the ceremony. Keep it simple and quick." "All right." They stood there for a moment, two broken people who'd somehow found each other at the end of a cruel joke, about to tie their lives together in the most binding way possible. Then Cole picked up his pitchfork and went back to work, and Nora did the same, because that's what they did. They worked. They built. They survived. And tomorrow they'd make it official. The ride into town the next day was tense and silent. Cole drove the wagon while Nora sat beside him, both of them dressed in their cleanest clothes, which still weren't much. Nora's best dress was faded blue calico, mended in several places. Cole wore a clean shirt and his least worn pants, his hair combed back but already falling into his eyes. They tied up outside the county clerk's office, and Nora felt every eye on them as they walked inside. The clerk was a thin, sour-faced man named Morrison, who looked up from his ledger with barely concealed disdain. "Help you?" "Marriage license," Cole said flatly. "Cole Ashford and Nora Briggs." Morrison's eyebrows shot up. "Is that so?" He pulled out a form with exaggerated slowness. Well, well, congratulations, I suppose. Though I must say, this is rather sudden, isn't it? You two only just. The license, Cole interrupted, his voice hard. That's all we need from you. Morrison's lips pursed, but he pushed the form across the counter. Fill this out. Both of you sign. That'll be $2. They filled out the form in silence, Nora's hand shaking as she signed her name. When they pushed it back, Morrison examined it with maddening slowness. Everything seems to be in order. I'll file this. You'll need someone authorized to perform the ceremony. Minister, judge, justice of the peace. I suppose you've already made arrangements. Working on it, Cole said, sliding the money across the counter. Well, good luck to you both. Morrison's smile was thin and knowing. I'm sure the whole town will be very interested to hear about this development. They left before Cole could say something that would get them thrown out. On the street, Nora felt the stares, heard the whispers starting already. Mrs. Halloway was standing outside the general store, her face a mask of shock and vindication. The boarding house girls were clustered nearby, their mouths forming perfect O's of surprise. Don't look at them, Cole muttered, guiding Nora toward the church at the end of the street. Just keep walking. The minister was a kind-faced older man named Reverend Michaels, who listened to their request with gentle eyes. Marriage is a sacred covenant, he said carefully. I'd be happy to perform the ceremony, but I'd like to speak with you both first. Make sure you understand the commitment you're making. With respect, Reverend, we understand plenty, Cole said. We're not children. We know what marriage means. I'm sure you do. But humor an old man. Reverend Michaels gestured to the pews. Sit. Tell me why you want to marry. Tell me about your intentions. Nora and Cole exchanged glances. Then Nora took a breath and told the truth, or at least part of it, about being sent to the ranch as a joke, about finding honest work, about Mrs. Halloway throwing her out and the gossip that had followed. She left out the parts that felt too raw, too private. Reverend Michaels listened without judgment. When she finished, he turned to Cole. And you, son? Why do you want to marry Miss Briggs? Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then, because she deserves better than what she's gotten. Because she works harder than anyone I know. Because... He stopped, his jaw tight. Because I'm tired of being alone, and she is too, and maybe we can be less alone together. The honesty of it hung in the air like something precious and fragile. Reverend Michaels nodded slowly. That's not the worst foundation for a marriage I've ever heard. Not the most romantic, perhaps, but honest. And honesty is rarer than romance. He stood. Very well. I'll perform the ceremony. When would you like to do this? Now, Cole said. If you're willing. Now? The Reverend looked surprised. No point waiting. We've got work to get back to. Reverend Michaels studied them both for a moment, then smiled. All right then, let me get my book. Do you have rings? Nora and Cole looked at each other, both clearly not having thought that far. No, Cole admitted. That's all right. They're traditional, but not required. The Reverend disappeared into a back room and returned with a worn Bible. Any witnesses? No, Nora said quietly. There's no one we want here. Something sad crossed the Reverend's face. Then I'll ask my wife to stand as witness. One moment. He returned with a plump, kindly woman who introduced herself as Martha Michaels and immediately took Nora's hands. Oh, sweetheart, you look terrified. Don't be. Marriage is a blessing, not a sentence. She smiled warmly. And if this young man treats you poorly, you come straight to me and I'll set him right. Despite everything, Nora felt herself smile. Thank you, ma'am. They stood before the altar, Nora in her faded dress, Cole in his work clothes, both of them smelling faintly of horses and hay. Reverend Michaels opened his Bible and began to speak. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. The words washed over Nora in a strange blur. She heard herself repeat the vows, heard Cole's rough voice doing the same. She felt his calloused hand take hers, felt the weight of his palm against her own. Do you, Cole Ashford, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? I do. And do you, Nora Briggs, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? Nora looked at Cole, really looked at him. At the man who'd given her work when she was desperate, defended her when she was mocked, offered her shelter when she had nowhere to go. The man who was damaged and angry and lonely, just like her. The man who'd asked for nothing except that she not run away. "I do," she said, and meant it. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Reverend Michaels smiled. "You may kiss your bride, son." Cole went very still. Nora felt her heart hammering. They hadn't discussed this part. Hadn't thought past the legal protection to the actual reality of being married. Then Cole leaned down and pressed a brief, chaste kiss to her forehead. "Welcome to the family," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. Nora felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. They signed the marriage certificate. Martha hugged Nora and pressed a small package of tea into her hands. "For luck." Reverend Michaels shook Cole's hand and reminded him that marriage was work worth doing well. And then they were walking back out into the bright afternoon, legally bound, fundamentally changed. The town watched them go. Mrs. Halloway's face was purple with outrage. The boarding house girls looked stunned. Harris and his friends, lounging outside the saloon, stared with open mouths. Cole helped Nora into the wagon, climbed up beside her, and drove them home without a word. Home. The word settled into Nora's chest with surprising weight. Not the boarding house. Not a room she might lose any week. Home. Hers. Theirs. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Cole helped Nora down from the wagon, his hand lingering on her arm for just a moment. "So," he said awkwardly, "I guess we're married now." "I guess we are." Nora looked at the house, the barn, the wide expanse of land stretching toward the horizon. "What happens now?" "Same as always. Work, supper, sleep. Nothing has to change, except the paperwork." Cole paused. "Unless you want it to." Nora met his eyes. "I don't know what I want yet. This is all happening so fast." "I know, and that's all right. We've got time to figure it out." He turned toward the barn. "I'll tend the horses. You go on inside, get settled. Make yourself some tea. I'll be in shortly." He walked away before she could respond, his shoulders tense, his stride purposeful. Nora watched him go, this man who was now her husband, and felt the full weight of what they'd done settle onto her shoulders. They'd gotten married to escape gossip, to create legal protection, to give each other the security they both desperately needed. But standing there in the fading light, watching Cole disappear into the barn, Nora realized something that made her heart race and her palms sweat. She didn't want it to just be an arrangement anymore. Somewhere between this cruel joke and the honest work, between the defense against mockers and the quiet morning coffees, something had grown. Something tender and terrifying that she didn't have a name for yet. And she had no idea if Cole felt it too, or if she was completely alone in this new, dangerous feeling. She walked into the house, their house now, and closed the door behind her, shutting out the world and all its cruel judgments. Inside, everything looked the same, but everything had changed, and tomorrow they would wake up as husband and wife and have to figure out what that really meant. Nora made tea with shaking hands, the kettle whistling in the quiet kitchen while outside the last light bled from the sky. She poured 2 cups out of habit, then stood there staring at them, wondering if Cole would even come inside or if he'd find reasons to stay in the barn until she went to bed. The marriage certificate sat on the table between the cups, official and binding, proof that everything had changed, even though Cole had promised nothing had to. She heard his boots on the porch steps, the creak of the door. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her standing there, his eyes going to the 2 cups of tea, then to her face. "You didn't have to wait for me," he said quietly. "I know." Nora pushed 1 cup toward the empty chair. "But I did anyway." Cole crossed the kitchen slowly, like he was approaching something that might bolt. He sat down, wrapped his hands around the cup, and stared into the steam rising from it. "Town's going to explode tomorrow," he said. "Morrison will have told everyone by now. By morning, there won't be a soul within 50 miles who doesn't know we got married. Let them explode." "You say that now, but I mean it." Nora sat across from him, her hands trembling only slightly as she lifted her own cup. I'm tired of caring what they think. I'm tired of letting their opinions control my life. You were right about the marriage making sense. It does, not just for protection, but because— She stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence without revealing too much. Cole looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Because what? Because I don't want to leave. The words came out quieter than she'd intended. Not the ranch, not the work, not— She gestured helplessly between them. Not this. Whatever this is. The silence stretched taut as wire. Cole's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he didn't know how to say. I don't know how to do this, he finally admitted, his voice rough. Be a husband. Be anything to anyone except angry and alone. My father— He stopped, his hands tightening on the cup. My father was a husband, and he made my mother's life hell. Robert was a husband, and he died and left Virginia broken. I don't have good examples, Nora. I don't know how to be what you might need. I don't need you to be like anyone else. I just need you to be honest with me, like you have been, like you are right now. Cole's eyes met hers, dark and intense. Honest. All right. Honestly? I'm terrified I'm going to ruin this, ruin you, that one day I'll lose my temper or say something cruel or— He shook his head. Everyone says I'm my father's son. What if they're right? You're not your father. Nora said it with such certainty that Cole looked startled. Your father would never have given me gloves for my bleeding hands. He wouldn't have defended me from mockery. He wouldn't have offered me shelter or married me to protect my reputation. You're nothing like him, Cole. Nothing. You don't know that. You don't know what I'm capable of when the anger fall— I've seen you angry. I've watched you slam axes into fence posts and kick baskets off porches. I've seen you punch a man for insulting me. But you've never once turned that anger on me. You've never once made me feel unsafe. She leaned forward. Do you know what that means? Do you know how rare that is? Cole looked away, his throat working. I married you without asking what you wanted from marriage, without asking if you wanted— He stopped, his face flushing. If you wanted a real marriage, a wife shouldn't have to sleep in a separate room from her husband. That's not right. Nora's heart hammered against her ribs. What are you saying? I'm saying I gave you an arrangement when maybe you deserved something more. I'm saying I was so focused on the practical parts that I didn't think about— He struggled visibly. About whether you might want things that come with a real marriage. Companionship, partnership, more than just legal protection. Do you want those things? Nora asked, barely breathing. Cole's eyes found hers again, and this time there was something raw and vulnerable in them that made her chest ache. I don't know if I'm allowed to want them. I don't know if I deserve them. But yeah, Nora, I want them. I want— He stopped, shook his head. Never mind. It's too soon. You've been here less than a month. We've been married less than a day. I shouldn't be— Cole. Nora reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. His skin was warm and rough, scarred from years of hard labor. Tell me what you want. He stared at their joined hands like he'd never seen anything like it before. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I want mornings to feel less empty. I want to sit across from someone at supper and not feel like I'm eating in a tomb. I want to work beside someone who sees past the angry rancher and knows— His voice cracked. Knows there's something more underneath, something worth knowing. And I want— God, Nora, I want to stop feeling so goddamn alone. Tears burned behind Nora's eyes. She turned his hand over and laced her fingers through his. You're not alone anymore, she said. Neither of us are. Cole looked at their intertwined hands, then slowly, carefully, brought them to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. It was achingly gentle, nothing like the brief forehead kiss in the church. This was different. This was real. I'll try, he said roughly. I'll try to be a good husband. I can't promise I'll always get it right, but I'll try. That's all I ask. They sat there in the lamplight, hands joined across the table, the marriage certificate between them now feeling less like a legal shield and more like a promise of something neither of them quite dared to name yet. Eventually, Cole cleared his throat and stood, though he was slow to release her hand. It's late. We should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. Need to finish that fence? Check on the mare who's favoring her front leg. Order more feed. Cole. Nora stood too, her heart pounding. My room or yours? He froze. What? You said a wife shouldn't have to sleep separately from her husband. So, my room or yours? Nora, I wasn't trying to pressure you into. I know, but we're married now, really married. And I don't want to spend tonight alone wondering if you're regretting this. She took a shaky breath. I want to fall asleep knowing you're there. Even if it's just sleeping, even if nothing else happens. I just want to not be alone. Cole's expression shifted through a dozen emotions too fast to name. Finally, he said, Mine. My room's bigger. And the bed. He stopped, clearly flustered. There's more space, so we don't have to. We can both fit comfortably without. Cole. Nora smiled despite her nervousness. It's all right, I understand. They cleaned up the tea things in charged silence. Then Cole led the way down the hall to his room. Nora had never been inside before. He'd said it was private, off limits, and she'd respected that boundary. Now she crossed the threshold and looked around with curious eyes. It was sparse, like the rest of the house, but there were small touches that revealed the man who lived here. A battered book on the nightstand, poetry, she saw with surprise. A photograph on the dresser showing two young boys, one dark-haired and serious, one fair and laughing. Robert and Cole, she realized, before everything went wrong. Before the anger and death and loneliness carved them into different people. The bed was indeed bigger than hers, covered with a simple quilt that looked handmade. Cole stood awkwardly by the dresser. I can sleep on the floor if you'd rather. Don't be ridiculous, it's your bed. Our bed now, I suppose. He said it like he was testing the words. I'll step out while you change. There's a nightshirt in the top drawer if you want it. It'll be too big, but it's clean. He left before she could respond. Nora found the nightshirt, soft cotton, worn from many washings, and changed quickly. It hung to her knees and the sleeves covered her hands, but it smelled like wood smoke and soap and something indefinably Cole. She climbed into the bed, acutely aware that this was his space, his sanctuary, and he was sharing it with her. Cole knocked softly before entering. He'd changed into sleep pants and an undershirt, his hair damp like he'd splashed water on his face. He looked younger somehow, less guarded. You comfortable? He asked. Yes. He crossed to the other side of the bed and climbed in carefully, maintaining a respectful distance between them. He blew out the lamp, plunging the room into darkness broken only by moonlight through the window. Nora lay on her back, hyper-aware of Cole's presence beside her. She could hear his breathing, feel the slight depression in the mattress from his weight. The space between them felt enormous and impossibly small at the same time. Nora? Cole's voice came soft through the darkness. Yes? Thank you for saying yes, for taking a chance on someone like me. Thank you for seeing something in me worth keeping. Silence fell again, but it was comfortable now, wrapping around them like the quilt. Nora felt her eyes growing heavy, the exhaustion of the day catching up with her. Just as she was drifting off, she felt Cole's hand find hers beneath the covers, his fingers intertwined with hers, warm and solid and real. She fell asleep like that, holding her husband's hand, and for the first time in her life, feeling completely safe. Morning came too soon, pale light filtering through the curtains. Nora woke slowly, confused for a moment about where she was. Then she felt the warmth beside her and remembered. Cole was still asleep, his face relaxed in a way she'd never seen while he was awake. The harsh lines had softened. He looked peaceful. She studied him in the dawn light, the strong jaw shadowed with stubble, the dark lashes, the slight scar above his left eyebrow. This was her husband. This complicated, damaged, unexpectedly tender man was hers now, in whatever way they chose to define that. As if sensing her gaze, Cole's eyes opened. For a moment he looked disoriented. Then his gaze focused on her, and something warm flickered in his expression. Morning, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Morning. They lay there for a heartbeat, neither moving. Then Cole seemed to remember himself and started to pull away. I should get up. Chores won't do themselves. Wait. Nora caught his hand. Just 5 more minutes, please. Cole settled back down, still on his side, facing her. 5 minutes, he agreed. They spent those 5 minutes in comfortable silence, just existing together in the quiet morning. It felt more intimate than anything Nora had ever experienced, this simple sharing of space and breath and waking. When they finally rose and dressed, moving around each other with new familiarity, Nora felt something settle in her chest. This was real. They were building something here, one careful moment at a time. Over breakfast, which they made together, Cole frying eggs while Nora sliced bread, there was an ease that hadn't been there before. Small touches as they moved past each other in the kitchen, shared glances, the beginning of something that felt almost like partnership. They were just finishing their coffee when they heard horses approaching, multiple horses. Cole's expression hardened. "Stay inside," he said, moving toward the door. "No." Nora followed him. "We're married now. Whatever comes, we face it together." Cole looked like he wanted to argue, but then he nodded. They stepped out onto the porch together. 6 riders were approaching, but these weren't the rough saloon crowd. Leading them was Virginia Ashford, her face set in lines of grim determination. Behind her rode Mrs. Halloway, the boarding house matron, along with 4 men Nora didn't recognize but who had the look of town officials. Cole's hand found Nora's, his grip tight. Virginia reined in her horse at the gate, her cold eyes taking in their joined hands with obvious distaste. "Cole," she said, her voice clipped, "we need to talk." "About what?" "About this farce of a marriage. About your abuse of a vulnerable young woman. About the fact that the entire town is concerned for Miss Briggs's welfare." "Mrs. Ashford," Nora said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm no longer Miss Briggs. I'm Mrs. Ashford now. And there's no abuse here." "So you say. But we have reason to believe you've been coerced into this marriage, that Mr. Ashford took advantage of your desperate circumstances to trap you into a situation you couldn't escape." Virginia's smile was sharp and cold. "I've brought Sheriff Matthews and Judge Thornton. They're here to investigate these allegations." One of the men, gray-haired and imposing, urged his horse forward. "Mr. Ashford, I'm Judge Thornton. I've heard some concerning reports about the circumstances of your marriage. I'd like to speak with your wife. Privately." "No." Cole's voice was flat. "Anything you need to ask her, you ask in front of me." "That's precisely the problem, Mr. Ashford. If the young woman is being threatened or intimidated, she can't speak freely with you present." "I'm not being threatened," Nora said loudly. "I married Cole of my own free will. No one forced me. No one coerced me." Mrs. Halloway spoke up then, her voice dripping with false concern. "Miss Briggs, I'm sorry, Mrs. Ashford. We all know how desperate your circumstances were. Living on the street, no family, no prospects. It would be understandable if you felt you had no choice but to accept Mr. Ashford's proposal, regardless of how inappropriate. It wasn't inappropriate, and I did have a choice. I chose to stay. I chose to marry him. Those were my decisions, made freely, and they're none of your business. Everything that happens in this town is our business when it concerns the welfare of its citizens," Judge Thornton said sternly. "Mrs. Ashford, I must insist on speaking with you alone. If what you say is true, you have nothing to fear from a private conversation." Cole's hand tightened on Nora's almost painfully. She could feel the tension radiating off him, the barely contained fury. She turned to look at him and saw fear in his eyes. Real, genuine fear that they were going to take her away from him. "It's all right," she said quietly, "just for him. Let me talk to them. Let me prove that this is real. They'll twist your words. They'll fail, because I'm going to tell them the truth, and the truth is stronger than any lie they're trying to build." She squeezed his hand. "Trust me." Cole looked like it was killing him, but he nodded. 5 minutes. That's all they get." Judge Thornton dismounted and gestured toward the barn. "Shall we, Mrs. Ashford?" Nora followed him, acutely aware of Cole watching from the porch, his fists clenched at his sides. Inside the barn, away from the others, the judge turned to her with a surprisingly kind expression. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm going to be blunt with you. Cole Ashford has a reputation in this town. His father was violent, his temper is legendary, and he's driven away every worker he's ever hired. Mrs. Virginia Ashford has made serious allegations that he threatened you, that he forced you into this marriage to avoid scandal, that you're essentially his prisoner here. That's all lies, Nora said firmly. Every word of it. Then tell me the truth. Start from the beginning. How did you come to work here? So Nora told him. Not the sanitized version, but the real story. About the boarding house girls sending her as a cruel joke. About Cole giving her honest work despite knowing she'd been sent to humiliate them both. About working herself raw and earning his respect through labor and determination. About Mrs. Halloway throwing her out to avoid scandal, and Cole offering her a room. About the decision to marry for protection, both his and hers, from a town that wanted to make them villains. He's never threatened me, she finished. Never hurt me. Never even raised his voice to me except once, when I pushed him about his dead brother, and even then he just told me to get back to work. He's given me more respect and dignity than anyone in this town ever has. So yes, I married him. And yes, it was my choice. And if Virginia Ashford or Mrs. Halloway or anyone else in this town has a problem with that, they can take it up with me. Judge Thornton was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he sighed. You love him. The words hit Nora like a physical blow. What? You love him. Maybe you don't know it yet, but it's written all over your face when you talk about him, the way you defend him, the fire in your eyes. The judge smiled sadly. Mrs. Ashford, I've been officiating marriages for 30 years. I know the difference between a woman who's been coerced and a woman who's chosen her path. You've chosen yours. The question is whether this town will accept that choice. With respect, Judge, I don't care if they accept it or not. I'm staying. We're staying. And they can gossip all they want, but they can't undo what's legal and binding. No, they can't. Judge Thornton nodded slowly. All right. I'll tell Virginia and the others that I find no evidence of coercion or abuse. But Mrs. Ashford, he paused, be careful. Virginia lost her husband and her child in the span of 2 months. That kind of grief can make people do terrible things. She blames Cole for Robert's death, fairly or not. Don't underestimate what a grieving woman might do to get revenge on the man she holds responsible. A chill ran down Nora's spine. What are you saying? I'm saying watch your back. Both of you. This isn't over just because I've ruled in your favor. They walked back outside together. Cole was exactly where she'd left him, rigid with tension. His eyes found hers immediately, searching for any sign of distress. Judge Thornton addressed the group. I've spoken with Mrs. Ashford at length. I find no evidence of coercion, threats, or abuse. The marriage was entered into freely by both parties and is legally valid. There's no cause for further investigation. Virginia's face went white with fury. That's absurd. She's clearly been manipulated. Mrs. Virginia Ashford, I understand your concern, but the law is clear. 2 consenting adults have married. Unless you have concrete evidence of wrongdoing, which you don't, there's nothing more to be done. The judge's voice was firm. I suggest you accept this and move on. I will not accept my brother-in-law destroying another woman's life the way he destroyed mine. The words rang out across the yard, harsh and bitter. Cole flinched like he'd been struck. Nora stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. He didn't destroy your life. An accident destroyed your life. A terrible, tragic accident that wasn't his fault. And you know what makes it worse? You're so consumed with blaming him that you can't see he's been destroying himself with guilt over something he couldn't control. How dare you? No, how dare you? Nora's voice rose, months of suppressed anger finally breaking free. You show up here trying to save me from a man who's given me nothing but respect and honest work, when the real cruelty came from women like you and Mrs. Halloway. You threw me out onto the street to protect your precious reputation. Those boarding house girls sent me here as a joke to humiliate me. But Cole? Cole gave me a chance. He gave me dignity. He gave me a home when no one else would. So don't you stand there and accuse him of being a monster when the real monsters are the people who think cruelty is acceptable as long as it's wrapped in respectability. Silence. Complete, profound silence. Then Mrs. Halloway spoke, her voice shaking with rage. You ungrateful little... That's enough. Sheriff Matthews, who'd been silent until now, moved his horse between them. Judge has made his ruling. This matter is closed. Everyone needs to leave this property. Now. Virginia stared at Nora with something that looked almost like hatred. You'll regret this, she said quietly. When he turns on you, when his temper finally breaks, you'll understand. And you'll be all alone because no one in this town will help you after the way you've spoken to us today." "Then I'll be alone," Nora said, "but I'll still have Cole, and that's more than enough." Virginia wheeled her horse around and galloped away. The others followed more slowly, Mrs. Halloway shooting one last poisonous look over her shoulder. When they were finally alone, Nora turned to find Cole staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You defended me," he said, his voice strange. "Of course I did. You're my husband. No one's ever—" He stopped, shook his head. "Robert tried, but he was my brother. He had to. But you didn't have to say any of that. You could have stayed quiet. You could have let them think whatever they wanted." "I could have, but I didn't want to." Nora crossed to him and took his hands in hers. "I meant every word, Cole. Every single word." Cole pulled her into his arms so suddenly she gasped. He held her tight against his chest, his face buried in her hair, his whole body trembling. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for—" His voice broke. "For seeing me." Nora wrapped her arms around him and held on just as tightly. "I see you," she said. "I see you, Cole Ashford, and I'm not going anywhere." They stood there in the morning sun, two broken people who'd found each other at the end of a cruel joke, holding each other like they were afraid to let go. And somewhere deep inside, Nora felt the last piece of her old self, the frightened, worthless girl from the boarding house, finally die. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, a woman who'd fought for her place in the world and won, a woman who'd found something worth more than safety or security or legal protection. She'd found belonging, purpose, partnership, and maybe, just maybe, love. They stood there for a long moment before Cole finally pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand like he was embarrassed to have shown so much emotion. But when he looked at Nora, there was something new in his expression, something open and unguarded that made her heart skip. "We should get to work," he said, but his voice was softer than usual. "That fence won't finish itself." "Cole!" Nora caught his arm before he could retreat. "What you said last night about wanting mornings to feel less empty and not being alone anymore, I want you to know that I want those things too. Not because of the marriage certificate or because we're legally bound. I want them because of you." His throat worked as he swallowed hard. "Nora, I don't know how to... I've never been good at the soft things, the words and the... You don't have to be good at words. You're good at actions. You've been showing me what you feel since the first day I got here. The coffee, the gloves, standing up for me. That's enough. That's more than enough." Cole's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with devastating gentleness. "You make me want to be better, want to be the kind of man who deserves you. You already are that man." He kissed her then, not on the forehead like in the church, but on the mouth, slow and careful and full of all the things he couldn't say. Nora melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt, her whole body coming alive with the rightness of it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I'd get this," he whispered. "Never thought I deserved it." "Well, you do. We both do. We've earned it." They worked side by side that day with a new awareness humming between them. Every accidental brush of hands felt electric. Every shared glance carried weight. The fence got mended, the horses got tended, the chores got done, but underneath it all was this growing certainty that something fundamental had shifted between them. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, they sat together on the porch, the same porch where Nora had first seen Cole attacking that wagon wheel with murderous rage. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been weeks. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Nora asked, watching the horses graze in the distance. "When I showed up here terrified and you were so angry?" "Every day." Cole's voice was quiet. "I almost sent you away. Told myself you were just another joke, another way for the town to mock me. But then you said you needed the work, and something in your voice..." He paused. "You weren't lying. You weren't playing games. You were just desperate and honest, and I couldn't turn you away. I'm glad you didn't." Me too. He reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world. You changed everything, Nora. This place, me, all of it. I didn't know how dead I was inside until you showed up and made me feel alive again. Nora turned to look at him fully. You did the same for me. I spent 19 years believing I was worthless because that's what everyone told me. But you looked at me and saw something worth keeping, worth defending, worth... She stopped, the word hovering on her lips, too big and too terrifying to say aloud. Worth loving, Cole finished for her, his dark eyes intense. Because I do, Nora. I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first day when you refused to give up, or maybe when you stood up to those men at the gate, or maybe every day in between. But it's true. I love you. Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks. I love you too. I was so scared to admit it, scared you'd think I was just grateful or confused, or I'd never think that. Cole pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. What we have, it's real. It started as survival and turned into something neither of us expected, something better. They sat there as darkness fell, wrapped in each other's arms, and Nora felt a peace she'd never known settle into her bones. This was home, not the house or the ranch, or even the wide prairie stretching endlessly around them. Home was this man, this moment, this love they'd built from the rubble of their broken pasts. The following weeks passed in a golden haze of hard work and growing intimacy. Cole taught Nora to ride, his hand steady on her waist as he helped her mount, his voice patient as he explained how to read a horse's mood. She taught him that it was okay to laugh, that joy wasn't something to be suspicious of, that he didn't have to carry every burden alone. They fell into new rhythms, morning coffee together, watching the sunrise. Working side by side, their movements synchronized like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. Evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. Nights in their shared bed, learning each other's bodies and hearts with equal tenderness. The town, predictably, had plenty to say about it all. But their condemnation had lost its teeth. Let them whisper, let them judge. Nora and Cole had each other, and that was fortress enough against any storm. It was a month after the wedding when the next crisis came. Nora was in the garden, a small plot Cole had helped her turn over so she could plant vegetables, when she heard shouting from the direction of the road. She stood, shading her eyes, and felt her blood run cold. Smoke. Black smoke rising from the direction of town. Cole came running from the barn, his face grim. Fire. Looks like it's near the church. We have to help. Nora was already moving toward the house to grab supplies. Nora, those people have made it clear they don't want anything from us. I don't care. A fire doesn't care about gossip or grudges. People could die. Cole stared at her for a heartbeat, then nodded sharply. All right, but we stay together. I'm not letting you out of my sight. They hitched up the wagon, loaded it with blankets and water barrels, and raced toward town. By the time they arrived, half of Main Street was engulfed in flames. The church stood at the center of the conflagration, its wooden steeple already collapsed. People ran in every direction, some carrying belongings, some just running blind with panic. Reverend Michaels was in the thick of it, his face streaked with soot, trying to organize a bucket brigade. His eyes widened when he saw Cole and Nora. Thank God, he gasped. We need everyone we can get. The fire started at the saloon and spread. We've got people trapped in the boarding house. Mrs. Holloway and some of the girls went back for their things, and now the stairway's blocked. Nora's heart stopped. She might not love those girls, might never forgive them for their cruelty, but she didn't want them to die. Where? Cole demanded. Second floor, east side. But Cole, it's too dangerous. Cole was already moving. Nora ran after him, ignoring the Reverend's protests. They reached the boarding house to find flames licking up the side of the building, smoke pouring from broken windows. A small crowd had gathered at a safe distance, watching helplessly. Someone has to go in, a woman was screaming. My daughter's in there. Cole assessed the building with quick, calculating eyes. The back stairs. If they're not burning yet, I can get through. We can get through, Nora corrected. No, absolutely not. You stay here where it's safe. Cole Ashford, We are not having this argument right now. Those girls might have been cruel to me, but I'm not letting them burn to death. Now move." Something fierce and proud flashed across Cole's face. Then he grabbed her hand and they ran together around to the back of the building. The back stairs were intact but filling fast with smoke. Cole soaked 2 cloths in water from a nearby trough and handed one to Nora. "Cover your mouth. Stay low. If anything starts to collapse, you run. You understand me? You get out and don't look back. Same goes for you." They plunged into the smoke together. The heat was immediate and overwhelming, the air thick enough to choke on. Nora could hear screaming from above, high, terrified voices calling for help. "Second floor!" Cole shouted over the roar of flames. "Come on!" They climbed the stairs, the smoke getting thicker with every step. At the top, Cole kicked open a door and they stumbled into a hallway. 3 doors down, they could hear pounding and screaming. "Here," Nora called. The door was locked from the outside, probably warped from the heat. Cole threw his shoulder against it once, twice, 3 times before it splintered open. Inside, huddled together in terror, were Mrs. Halloway and 4 of the boarding house girls. Susanna, Betty, Lila, and one other girl Nora didn't know well. Their faces were streaked with tears and soot, their eyes wide with shock when they saw who'd come to save them. "You," Susanna breathed. "You came for us." "Move," Cole barked. "We don't have time for conversation. The front stairs are gone. We're going out the back. Stay close, stay low, and don't stop moving no matter what you hear." He led them back into the hallway. The smoke was worse now, the heat intense enough to sear their lungs. Nora brought up the rear, making sure no one fell behind. They were halfway down the back stairs when there was a terrible groaning sound and part of the ceiling collapsed behind them, sending up a shower of sparks and burning debris. "Go, go, go!" Cole pushed them forward, his body shielding the women in front of him. They burst out into the blessed cool air of the evening, coughing and gasping. The crowd rushed forward with blankets and water. Someone was crying. Someone else was praying. Nora bent double, her lungs burning, her eyes streaming. She felt Cole's hand on her back, heard his voice rough with smoke asking if she was all right. She nodded, unable to speak yet. When she finally straightened, she found Mrs. Halloway staring at her with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Why?" the older woman croaked. "After everything we did to you, why would you risk your life to save us?" Nora met her eyes steadily. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because holding grudges doesn't mean I want people to die. Because someone taught me that being cruel back to cruel people doesn't make you strong. It just makes you like them." She looked at Susanna, Betty, and Lila, who were huddled together, looking small and scared, and nothing like the vicious girls who'd tormented her. "I hope you're all right," Nora said simply. "I hope this teaches you something about the kind of people you want to be." She turned away before any of them could respond and found Cole waiting for her, his hand extended. She took it, and they walked back toward their wagon together, leaving the chaos and the fire and the judgment of the town behind them. It took 3 days to fully extinguish the fire. The damage was extensive. The saloon was completely destroyed, the boarding house uninhabitable, several other buildings badly damaged. The town rallied together in the aftermath, and something strange happened. People started looking at Cole and Nora differently. It began with Reverend Michaels, who made a point of thanking them publicly at a community meeting. Then the mother of one of the girls came to the ranch with a basket of food and tears in her eyes, thanking them for saving her daughter. Word spread about how Cole had risked his life running into a burning building, how Nora had refused to leave the girls behind despite everything they'd done to her. The town's opinion began to shift, slowly, grudgingly, but unmistakably. A week after the fire, Virginia Ashford rode out to the ranch alone. Nora saw her coming from the garden and called for Cole. They met her together at the gate, united in a way that made Virginia pull her horse to a stop and just stare at them for a long moment. "I came to apologize," she said finally, the words clearly costing her. "Not for everything. I still think—" She stopped, shook her head. "But I was wrong about you and Mrs. Ashford. I was wrong about your marriage, and I was wrong to try to punish you for Robert's death." Cole's hand tightened on Nora's. "Virginia, let me finish. Let me—" Virginia's eyes were red-rimmed, her face drawn. I've been so angry for so long that I forgot what Robert would actually want. He loved you, Cole. He never blamed you, and he'd hate what I've become, the way I've used his memory as a weapon. She looked at Nora. I heard what you did at the fire, what you both did. Robert would have been proud. He always said Cole had the biggest heart of anyone he knew, even if he hid it behind anger. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. For everything. For trying to destroy what you've built here. For not seeing that maybe you both deserve happiness after all. Thank you, Nora said quietly. That means more than you know. Virginia nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm leaving town. Going back east to be with my family. Try to heal properly, away from all these memories. But I wanted you to know. She looked at Cole. Robert would want you to be happy. I want you to be happy, even if it took me too long to realize it. She rode away before either of them could respond, leaving them standing at the gate watching her disappear down the road. Do you think she meant it? Nora asked. I think she's trying to. Cole pulled Nora against his side, and that's more than I ever expected from her. As summer deepened into autumn, life at the ranch found its rhythm. The garden Nora had planted flourished, providing fresh vegetables for their table. Cole hired a hand, a quiet young man named Thomas, who worked hard and asked no questions. The ranch prospered in small but steady ways, and Nora and Cole grew into their marriage like plants growing towards sunlight, naturally, inevitably, with increasing strength. One evening in late October, with the first frost warning in the air and the sunset painting the sky in shades of fire, they sat together on their porch bench, the one Cole had built those early weeks because he said Nora shouldn't have to sit on the ground like an animal. Do you ever miss it? Cole asked suddenly. Town, other people, the boarding house even? Nora laughed. The boarding house? Cole, that place was hell. But you had other women around, conversation, society, such as it was. Out here it's just me and Thomas and a lot of empty prairie. Out here is perfect. Nora leaned her head on his shoulder. Out here I have you. I have honest work and a real home, and a husband who sees me as a person, not a punchline. Why would I miss anything about my old life? Because you're young. Because you deserve more than just a ranch and a damaged man who doesn't always know how to show you what you mean to him. Nora sat up and turned to face him fully. Cole Ashford, listen to me. I spent 19 years being told I was too much, too fat, too ugly, too worthless to deserve anything good. Then I came here and you showed me I was wrong. Not with pretty words or grand gestures, but with steady, honest care. You gave me work that mattered. You defended me when no one else would. You married me when I had nothing to offer but myself. You taught me that I was worth something. Worth everything. Her voice shook with emotion. So no, I don't miss my old life. I don't miss the cruelty or the loneliness or the constant fear. I love this life, this ranch, this future we're building. And most of all, I love you. Cole's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you too. So damn much it scares me sometimes, because I keep waiting for it to be taken away. For you to realize you could do better, be happier somewhere else. Not going to happen. Nora took his face in her hands. You're stuck with me, Cole Ashford, for better or worse, in sickness and health, until death do us part. Remember? We made those vows. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Nora corrected with a smile. The first best was giving that stubborn, terrified fat girl a chance when everyone else saw her as a joke. You were never a joke. You were always extraordinary. I just saw it first. They kissed as the sun set, two people who'd been broken by the world and somehow found a way to make each other whole. Two people who'd started as a cruel prank and ended as an unbreakable partnership. Two people who'd proved that sometimes the best love stories don't start with attraction or destiny. They start with desperation and kindness and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. Winter came hard and cold, but the ranch was ready. Cole had spent the fall months preparing, and Nora had learned to preserve food, mend clothes, and manage a household through the lean times. They worked together like a well-oiled machine, anticipating each other's needs, supporting each other's weaknesses, celebrating each other's strengths. On Christmas morning, Cole gave Nora a beautiful leather-bound journal. For writing, he said, almost shyly, your thoughts, or recipes, or whatever you want. I just thought, you're smart, Nora, Smarter than me. And you should have somewhere to put all those thoughts. Nora gave him a photograph she'd commissioned in town, a portrait of the two of them standing in front of the ranch house, both wearing their wedding clothes, both looking directly at the camera with small, genuine smiles. "For your dresser," she said, "so you can remember that you're not alone anymore, that you have family now." Cole stared at the photograph for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe. "Best Christmas I've ever had," he whispered into her hair. "First of many," Nora promised. Spring came eventually, as it always does, bringing new life and new possibilities. Nora discovered she was pregnant in early April, and when she told Cole, he went very still and very pale. "A baby," he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "We're having a baby. Are you all right? I know we didn't plan. Are you kidding?" Cole's face broke into the widest smile Nora had ever seen on him. "Nora, this is everything. A family. A real family. Our own." He dropped to his knees in front of her and pressed his forehead to her still flat stomach, his shoulders shaking with emotion. "I'm going to be better," he promised, talking to the baby inside her. "I'm going to be the kind of father my dad never was, patient and kind and present. I'm going to teach you everything worth knowing. I'm going to protect you and love you and make sure you never doubt for 1 second that you're wanted." Nora ran her fingers through his hair, tears streaming down her face. "You're going to be an amazing father. We're going to be amazing parents," Cole corrected, looking up at her with so much love it took her breath away. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. The town, which had fully come around after the fire, rallied around them with gifts and advice. Even the boarding house girls, scattered to various new lodgings after the fire, sent small presents. Susanna's note was simple. "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. I'm sorry for everything. I hope your baby is as brave as their mother." In November, on a cold, clear night with a million stars overhead, Nora gave birth to a daughter. Cole held her hand through every contraction, his face pale with worry but his grip steady and strong. And when the baby finally came, when they heard that first strong cry, he wept openly. "She's perfect," he breathed, cradling the tiny bundle against his chest. "She's absolutely perfect." "What should we name her?" Nora asked, exhausted but radiant. Cole looked down at his daughter, and then at his wife, the woman who'd changed his entire world. "Hope," he said. "We should name her Hope, because that's what you gave me when you walked onto this ranch. Hope that I could be more than my past. Hope that I deserved happiness. Hope for a future worth living." "Hope Ashford," Nora said, testing the name. "It's perfect." They sat together in the lamplight, mother, father, and baby, while outside the winter wind howled across the prairie. But inside everything was warm and safe and full of love. Years would pass. Hope would grow strong and brave, inheriting her mother's stubborn determination and her father's fierce protectiveness. More children would come, 2 boys and another girl, filling the ranch house with noise and laughter and chaos. Thomas would become like family, eventually marrying a girl from town and building his own house on the far corner of the property. The ranch would prosper beyond their wildest dreams, becoming one of the most successful in the territory. But none of that mattered as much as this moment, this night, this tiny family huddled together against the cold. Because this was where it had all started, with a joke that became a job that became a home that became a love story, and a love story that became a legacy. Nora Ashford, formerly Nora Briggs, the fat girl from the boarding house who everyone said was worthless, sat in a rocking chair with her husband's arm around her shoulders and her baby daughter sleeping in her arms, and knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she belonged. She'd been sent to the meanest man in 3 counties as a punchline. She'd stayed because of his unexpected kindness. She'd married him because of his steadfast protection. And she'd loved him because underneath all that anger and damage was a man who'd been waiting his whole life for someone to see him, truly see him, and choose him anyway. The girl who was sent as a joke had become the woman who saved them both. And that, Nora thought as she drifted off to sleep surrounded by love, was the best revenge of all. Not cruelty returned for cruelty. Not bitterness or anger or proving anyone wrong, but building a life so full of joy and purpose and love that the opinions of small-minded people became utterly irrelevant. The ranch stood solid and strong on the edge of town, a testament to hard work and second chances and the transformative power of seeing someone's worth when the rest of the world has decided they have none. And inside that ranch, a family slept peacefully, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Unbreakable, unshakable, complete. The joke had become the triumph. The laughter had become love. And Nora and Cole Ashford, two broken souls who'd found each other at rock bottom, had built themselves a heaven right here on Earth.